Assalamu alaikum. This is lecture 24 of web design and development, and in this lecture we are going to continue our discussion about errors and input validation. And in this lecture we are going to focus on the errors and exception handling. Here are the lecture contents. First of all, we will discuss about the errors and exceptions. There are certain discriminations about those two concepts. The errors or exceptions can be logged into a database file or simple text file for the later inspections, or you can create a number of exception handlers to manage your exceptions. So exception handlers are provided by the Laravel application, and if these exception handlers do not cover your cases, you can create your own custom exceptions to handle your errors. First of all, let's differentiate between error and an exception. An error is a term used to describe any issue that arises unexpectedly and result in incorrect output. So logical errors occur due to poor understanding of problem or solution procedure. However, exception is not an error which is which occurs due to the understanding of the problem. Rather, exceptions are runtime anomalies or unusual conditions that a program may encounter while executing, such as a file not found is a common example of the exception which is not an error. So event that occurs during the execution of program and that interrupts the normal flow of the control. So there are two common types of exceptions: synchronous exceptions and asynchronous exceptions. The exceptions which occur during the program execution due to some fault in the input data are known as synchronous exceptions. For example, a variable can be out of the range of the specified value, or it can be an overflow or divide by zero exception, or some wrong data type exception. On the other hand, asynchronous exceptions are defined as the exceptions caused by the events or faults unrelated to the program and beyond the control of the program are called asynchronous execution. For example, error made by the keyboard interrupts, network failure, or unavailability of third-party service or file, etc. Exception handling mechanism provides a means to detect and report exception circumstances. So there are predefined steps in any programming languages to handle the exception. The first step is to claim the exception, which means you have to find out the errors into the runtime program. The next step is the throwing exception. It means if you have caught the error, you have to inform to the program that this error has occurred. The third step will be catching that exception. It means you have some mechanism to catch a number of exceptions and receive what kind of error has occurred. And finally, you have to manage that error or handle that exception or to take care of the corrective action so that your program may terminate or provide some error messages in a suitable way. So a method has the option of throwing one or more exceptions when specified conditions occur. So this exception must be claimed by the method. Another method calling this method must either catch or rethrow the exception unless it is a runtime exception. So the basic mechanism is to catch and specify the error. Most exceptions are subject to so-called catch or specify requirements. One must specify the exception in the method signature where the method call appears. Laravel provides a built-in exception handler. However, if you require a new one, you can build your own custom exception handler. So the first way or first point where you can catch the errors is the debugging your application. The debugging is enabled by default in web application. For example, if you open the web config file in config/app.php, and you can find out the debug attribute, which is by default set to true. So this means your debugging is enabled, and whenever you encounter the error, the error information will be caught by the Laravel exception handler, and it will be provided to you into your web application. So it will help you to debug the errors and generated by the applications. The default value is set to the app debug environment variable into the environment file as well. However, if you are in the development environment, you should set it to true so that you can easily trace the errors and fix them. On the other hand, you want to switch it off into the production environment. For example, if your website is up and running to the users, you should disable this option, and it will display a general uh, error page. In this case, for example, 404 not found, or resource not found, or something wrong has happened error, as you have seen in a number of examples onto the web application. The other way to actually find out the information about the error or where error has occurred is the logging mechanism. So in addition to displaying error, Laravel allows you to log errors into the log file using the option available for the logging in config/app.php file again. So now you have to find out two variables, log and log level. First is a log, that is app log, and it is set to single app log. That means only one app file will be created. And what level you want to log into your log file is app log level set to debug. So you can also use the production environment to log your all the errors into the log file. So default log file is located in storage/log/laravel log, and it is sufficient in most cases. However, if you want to use some other file, you can also use app log level, and it's set to the value that indicates the severity of errors that will be logged. The other way is to when you have all the information into the log or debugging files, you can use the exception handler. So exception handler is provided by default by the Laravel application, is stored at app/exception/handler.php file. So that there are two important functions that the handler class is responsible for reporting and handling all errors. So first of all is report method, and it catches a throwable exception and only sends the report exception to the user. The method is used to log errors to the log file. At the same time, it is also important to note that don't report property which lists all types of exceptions that should not be logged. So if you open this file, you must have seen this variable into the file. So if the report method is used to log or report errors, the render method is used to render errors on a screen. So in fact, this method handles what will be displayed to the users when exception occurs. So the render method allows uh, you to customize a response from different types of exceptions, and you can use the customized render page to display on this page or display in this method. Finally, the unauthenticated method handles the unauthentication exception that allows you to decide what will be displayed to user in case they are authenticated to the an access page they are looking for. So only if authentication is enabled, you do not have to worry if it is not yet. So the final way is to create your custom exceptions if none of the predefined exception is handled by the Laravel exception. So create a custom exception into the app/exceptions custom exception.php file that handle exceptions for the custom exception type. The idea behind the creating a custom exception class is easily manage custom exception and render custom responses at the same type. So as the same as the previous case, you have the same class and it extends the exception class, and it has two methods, report and render. So we do not report any exception in this case. However, we generate a response if an exception is error occurred, and we show an error custom view and provide it with the exception provided here. So we show a custom error page, and we send some information to that custom error page. For example, we can only show that there is something wrong into the application, or we can specify a particular value or some attributes of the exception in that custom error page. So as described earlier, it redirects the user to the error custom error page in this case. In that way, you can implement the custom error pages for the specific types of exceptions. For example, if we send the exception with the custom exception page, you need to create a view file in the resources/view/error custom.blade.php file and provide some text about the exception details in bold format and rendering the exception and calling out the get method. So that's pretty simple view file that displays an error message, but of course you could design it in a way you want to be it you want it to be. We also need to make changes in the render method of the file that was provided into the main exception class so that our custom exception class can be invoked. You have to replace the render method with the new contents into the app/exception/file handler. So the type of exception in the render method is checked in the first place, and an exception is a custom exception, then it will call the render method. So you can create a controller method in the business controller to the point of exception. So here is our new render method, and we check that if it is a custom method, you have to load the render method of this exception of custom exception class. Otherwise, you have to load to the random render the parent render method. And you finally, if you look at the accept method, and we show that something went wrong when you want to throw custom exception, and you throw a new custom exception with the message showing that something went wrong. You can also add an associated root in the web slash root slash web.php and get the exception root, providing the method name accept. Run your application and write invalid URL to see that if it works as expected. So you can follow this procedure exactly when you're creating your own exception. You may also add functionality so that the relevant message is stored when the error is thrown, or any other customized functionality you choose. Some recommendations are here: that do not use the exceptions to handle normal conditions in the program that can be checked with the if statement or null statements. For example, to find out the end of an array, you can write the if statement, but to check an object is null. So if you want to read more about the topic, you can look at the chapter number 16 of this recommended book, or you can visit to this recommended URL. If you have any questions, You can ask me. Thank you very much.